Scottie Scheffler won the 2025 PGA Championship by 5 strokes. Dominant, untouchable. The best player in the world doing exactly what the best player in the world is supposed to do. But months later, one question started following that victory. And it had nothing to do with his swing. But here's what nobody told you while you were watching. Out of 156 players standing on that first tee at Quail Hollow, only about 50 of them had their drivers tested, 50 in a field competing for one of golf's 4 biggest titles. And Scottie Scheffler, his driver didn't pass. So here's the question nobody on television had the nerve to ask out loud. If the world number 1 walks into a major with a club that fails a conformance test, plays 4 rounds, wins by 5 shots, and the tour responds with total silence, what exactly does the word legal mean in professional golf anymore? Stay with me. Because this goes deeper than one driver. May 2025, Quail Hollow Club, Charlotte, North Carolina. The PGA Championship, second major of the year. One of the most prestigious events in the sport. The field is stacked, the pressure is real, and before a single shot is hit, something happens behind closed doors that the tour would have preferred stayed there. The USGA arrives with testing equipment. Their job, check driver conformance. Make sure nobody is playing a club with a face that's worn too thin, too hot, too springy. A face that gives the ball more speed off the tee than the rules allow. They run the characteristic time test, a precise measurement of how long a ball stays on the club face at impact. The longer it stays, the more energy transfers. The more energy transfers, the farther the ball goes. And past a certain threshold, the club is illegal. They test roughly 1/3 of the 156-man field. Not everyone, not even close to everyone. Rory McIlroy's driver fails first. That story leaks mid-tournament, and the internet explodes. Fans are furious. The media runs wall-to-wall coverage. McIlroy goes silent, refuses to speak to reporters for the entire week. He finished tied for 47th, and then, almost as an afterthought, Xander Schauffele steps in front of a microphone and says something that changes the whole story. He tells reporters he believes Scottie Scheffler switched to a backup driver too. The tournament leader, the man is about to win by 5 shots. The man holding the trophy on Sunday. Before we get into what Scheffler said, and more importantly, what the PGA Tour refused to say, tell me something. Do you think the tour protects its biggest stars when controversy gets too close? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you're new here, subscribe, because this channel does not let these stories die quietly. Schauffele didn't whisper it. He said it plainly in front of reporters, on camera, on the final day of a major championship. I think Scott is winning the tournament, and I think he switched to his backup too. See, you don't even know because he's so good. That one sentence lit the internet on fire. Within hours, the narrative was already written in golf forums, comment sections, and social media threads across every platform. Fans weren't asking questions anymore. They were making statements. Scheffler played an illegal driver. Scheffler won a major with illegal equipment. Scheffler got away with it because he's the number 1 player in the world, and the tour wasn't going to torch its biggest star over an equipment scandal in the middle of its most watched event of the year. And here's the part that made the accusation stick. The USGA confirmed that all testing results are strictly confidential, no public disclosure, no official list of who passed and who failed, just silence dressed up as policy. So fans filled that silence themselves, the way fans always do. Now, before you decide whether they were right or wrong, understand what a non-conforming driver actually means. Because this is where most coverage got it completely backwards. A non-conforming driver doesn't mean someone smuggled an illegal club into a tournament. It doesn't mean a player cheated in the way most people understand cheating. What it means is more complicated than that, and honestly, more damaging to the tour than any individual player. So that's the whole story, right? Scheffler cheated, won, and walked away clean. Except that's not even close to what actually happened. Let's slow this down, because the details here are exactly what the tour was hoping you'd never look closely at. A driver's face is not static. Every single time that club makes contact with a golf ball, the face flexes, compresses, rebounds, and over hundreds of thousands of impacts across a professional season, that face gets thinner, more elastic, more spring-like, until eventually it crosses a line the rules won't allow. The USGA calls it the characteristic time test. They measure in microseconds in exactly how long the ball stays in contact with the face at impact. Too long means too much energy transfer. Too much energy transfer means extra distance the rules never authorized. And a face that crosses that threshold gets stamped non-conforming. Not because the player did anything wrong, but because physics did what physics does to metal under pressure. Scheffler knew it was coming. He said so himself after the trophy was already in his hands. He'd used that driver for over a year. The wear was inevitable. The failure wasn't a surprise. But here is where the story stops being about one player and starts being about a system that was never designed to catch everyone. Only 50 drivers were tested at Quail Hollow, 50 out of 156, which means over 100 players walked to the first tee at a major championship with equipment that was never examined, never verified, never confirmed legal. Think about that number. There are three things about this testing process the PGA Tour has never answered publicly. Here's the first. Who exactly decided which 50 drivers got checked? Here's the second. Was the selection truly random? And here's the third. What happens to the players nobody tested? Because if Scheffler's driver failed after 1 year of use, what condition were the untested drivers in? Here's what separates this story from every other equipment controversy in recent memory. Scheffler didn't hide, didn't deflect, didn't let his management team release a carefully worded statement at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night hoping nobody noticed. He stood at the podium, trophy beside him, and said it himself. The driver testing is something that regularly happens on tour. My driver did fail me this week. We had a feeling it was going to be coming because I've used that driver for over a year. I was kind of fortunate for it to last that long. Read that again. He said he was fortunate his driver lasted as long as it did. Not unfortunate that it failed, fortunate that it survived a full year of major championship golf before the face wore past the legal limit. That is not the language of someone who got caught. That is the language of someone who understood exactly how this system works and had been quietly managing it the whole time. And then he went further than anyone expected, further than the tour probably wanted. I would argue that if we're going to test the drivers, we need to be even more robust in the way we test them. We're almost going halfway with it right now. The man who just won the PGA championship with a backup driver when he was standing at the winner's podium demanding stricter rules, calling out the very system that handed him a clean result, which raises a question nobody in that press room thought to ask out loud. If Scheffler is calling the current process inadequate, what does that tell you about every tournament where no testing happened at all? Forget Scheffler for a moment. Forget McIlroy. Forget the leaderboard. Forget the 5-shot victory and the trophy and the press conference. Strip all of that away, and what you're left with is an institution that designed a testing system so incomplete, so selectively applied, so deliberately quiet, that it couldn't catch a problem even when the problem was standing at the winner's podium, telling them it existed. This didn't start at Quail Hollow. That's the part that should bother you most. Xander Schauffele's driver failed ahead of the 2019 British Open. He had to scramble for a replacement at the last minute. He called it infuriating, and then nothing changed. No public discussion, no tour-wide policy review, no mandatory testing across the full field. The story disappeared because Schauffele didn't win that week, and nobody needed a villain. 6 years later, same system, same partial testing, same confidentiality shield, same silence. Think about what that silence actually protects. If the USGA tests 1/3 of the field and keeps every result confidential, then 2/3 of professional golf's biggest events are running entirely on the honor system. No verification, no confirmation. Just trust that equipment worn down across a full season of tour stops somehow stays inside the legal limit on its own. And here's the detail that should stop you cold. Call back to that number from the cold open. 50 drivers tested out of 156. That means statistically, given the failure rate among tested players at Quail Hollow, There is a genuine possibility that players with non-conforming drivers competed in that major and finished ahead of players who were clean. Before we get to what Scheffler said that almost nobody reported, do you think the PGA Tour will ever mandate full-field driver testing at every major? And subscribe if this is the first time you're hearing how deep this actually goes, because the next part changes everything. Here is what the PGA Tour never answered. Here is what the USGA never answered. Here is what nobody with an official title and a microphone has been willing to address directly, even after the story broke wide open at Quail Hollow. Who decided which 50 drivers got tested? The PGA of America said the selection process exists. They confirmed the USGA conducted the testing. They confirmed approximately 1/3 of the field was checked, and then they stopped talking. No criteria published, no methodology explained, no independent review offered. Just a number, 50, floating in public without context or accountability. Second question, was Scheffler selected randomly or flagged specifically? Because Scheffler himself said he had a feeling his driver was going to fail. He knew, his team knew, which means someone in that equipment chain had information about the condition of that club face before the USGA ever showed up with a testing kit. So did the tour know too? And if they knew, when exactly did they know it? Third question, the one nobody wants to answer, what happened to the players nobody tested? Here is your split path. Either the tour genuinely believes 1/3 of the field is a statistically sufficient sample to protect competitive integrity at a major championship, in which case their understanding of fairness is broken. Or they know 1/3 isn't enough, have always known, and built the system that way deliberately, because full transparency would open a door they cannot afford to walk through. Either the tour is incompetent, or the tour is calculating. Both answers should make you uncomfortable, because Scheffler went public in 2025 demanding change, called the process inadequate from the winner's podium. And the USGA's response was to announce they would not be altering their testing protocols, would not be releasing results, would not be expanding the tested pool. What changed after the biggest driver scandal in major championship history? Absolutely nothing. The real scandal was never about Scheffler. It was never about one driver, one failure, one major. It was about a governing body that built a system designed to look like oversight without ever committing to what real oversight actually costs. It was about a tour that lets its biggest stars manage their own equipment integrity on the honor system and calls that process protecting the field. Scheffler didn't cheat, but the system he plays inside, it was never built to prove that either way. So here's my question to you, and I want to see your answers below. Where are you watching from? Your city, your country? Drop it in the comments and tell me this. Do you believe the PGA Tour will ever mandate full field driver testing at every single major, or is the silence part of the plan?